It is that time of season already where I'm looking at players and I'm saying, hey, I think these guys should be moving up my dynasty rankings as the 2024 rookie class approaches. Okay, I'm bringing you 4 players that are currently moving up my dynasty rankings, saying, hey, maybe you should be buying, maybe you should be investing, maybe you should be holding in these guys because these guys are going to be continuing to rise up my rankings as the offseason gets going here. So stay tuned and let's get straight into my risers. All right, before I get into my first riser, I just want to make a disclaimer. I didn't want to bring some obvious names. I didn't want to bring the CJ Strouds, the Trey McBrides, the Puka Nacua, because those guys have been taking off. I've been trying to find people that are a little bit low-key that say, hey, I see a pathway for them having a bigger role in 2024. And starting off at the wide receiver position, that is Jayden Reed here for the Green Bay Packers. And look, from what he's doing so far, it's been pretty good. 40 receptions, 64 targets, just over 500 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He's currently the wide receiver 36. And keep in mind, this is through week 13, okay? I am recording this right before week 14, so I've seen 13 weeks of the season so far. According to the community, he is wide receiver 32. He's my wide receiver 25 in my dynasty rankings right now, and I can easily see that moving up or moving down depending on some situations, of course. But the reason why he is a riser, and I look into the future in the 2024 season of him truly being a high to mid-end wide receiver 2, or even being a low-end wide receiver 1B. Maybe think of, I'm not saying he has the talents of the Devonta Smiths or the T. Higgins, but he can be somebody that can potentially be producing those type of numbers if Jordan Love is truly this guy, and I'll get to him a little bit later. But depending also how you feel on Christian Watson and what the Green Bay Packers are going to be doing in the NFL draft. Do the Packers go out and get another wide receiver? How much do you believe in Christian Watson and him taking away opportunities, which I will also get to a little bit later. But what I really wanted to do is break down the first, 13 weeks of the season, what he did before his bye week and after his bye week, because a lot of the time Zach and I say, you know what, some of these rookies are going to get opportunities after their bye week. You think of that bye week bump for these rookies, and that's exactly what you saw here with Jayden Reed. And you can probably see this on your screen. In week 1 to 5 was before his bye week, and week 7 to 13 was after his bye week. And you can see the progression of production. Receptions, you see that move up to 13 to 23. The targets, 27 to 32. The yards, just nearly 70 more yards this in those weeks, right? 2 more touchdowns for Jayden Reed overall, averaging over 14 fantasy points in the second half of the season. And look at the fantasy finish here. Wide receiver 46 to wide receiver 13. How big is that? He is currently, in my opinion, a league winner, as if he continues to produce the way he's producing here, maybe in a flex position. And look, some of you guys may be saying, well, hey, what about Christian Watson? I know he's been hurt. I know he's been, a little bit iffy with his production this year. But look, with Christian Watson in, and probably see the graphic on your screen, he hasn't really been that big of a difference or hindrance to Jayden Reed. You can see the fantasy points with Christian Watson in 11.3 fantasy points, and then out 11.8. There's not that big of a difference. There's not that big of a hit when it comes down to Jayden Reed's production, which encouraged me, because if Christian Watson does stay healthy for a full season, I feel really confident that Jayden Reed is going to continue to receive his production going throughout the whole season of 2024, hypothetically, right? Another reason for me to feel confident about Jayden Reed going into this year or next year is that the competition, and especially the position that he plays at the wide receiver, specifically the slot wide receiver, I don't see the Packers necessarily investing in someone in that position. I see them potentially investing in a wide receiver if they really wanted to, but I think there are other priorities when you look at this Packers offense where they need to address, or maybe even their defense, right? Davy Bakhtiari is in question with all these injuries. Is he going to return? Is he going to walk away? Aaron Jones, they need a running back coming in, right? Aaron Jones doesn't look the same. Is A.J. Dillon truly the answer? Do they spend money or draft a running back in free agency? They traded away Aaron and Amos, right, to the, if I'm not mistaken, I forgot where it was actually, but they traded him away. He is no longer with the team. Did they go with somebody in the secondary? I don't think there are people in not people, but I don't think this organization is going to be aiming for fixing the wide receiver room. They did that, last year with drafting Jaden Reed, Dontavion Wicks. You saw Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave go to the Green Bay Packers. I think they're pretty good on the skill position. Obviously, they can improve without a doubt in different areas, but I feel pretty confident that Jalen Reed's role specifically, unless they get an elite slot wide receiver like an Emeka Mbuka going to the Green Bay Packers, then we'll have a new conversation, right? But if they get someone like a Rome Odunze that can go on the outside, someone like a Troy Franklin that potentially can go on the outside, a Brian Thomas that can go on the outside as well, I won't be afraid for someone like a Jaden Reed. And my last point here is the ascension of Jordan Love, right? I was somebody that was dumb enough to trade away Jordan Love in the middle of the season where he was having that up and down season, saying, hey, I'm not necessarily sure if he is going to come back from this. I'm not necessarily sure if the Green Bay Packers have a top 8 pick in the NFL draft, that they're not going to be having conversations if Jordan Love is going to be this guy. But we've seen in that second half of the season now that Jordan Love is picking it up. Jordan Love is winning these tough games. He just beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Then he's playing my beloved Giants on Monday night here. Once again, I'm recording this going into week 14. But if he's going to continue to look the way he looks now as I'm recording this video, and maybe this will change later on, I am not concerned about Jordan Love and how he can produce a fantasy relevant wide receiver room like we saw with Jaden Reed, like we've seen a very minuscule role with Christian Watson, the same thing with Romeo Doubs, right? We've seen that. I mean, we've talked a big game as well with Luke Musgrave when he was healthy. We saw him get an uptick in production. He was spreading the ball around and producing fantasy relevant assets for this team. So look, I may be bullish on Jaden Reed right now. Once again, my wide receiver 25 in the community, wide receiver 32. But if all those things checks out, if they don't draft another I would say a premium slot wide receiver to go on this team, I am not concerned about Jaden Reed. If they bring in someone like a T. Higgins or Rome Odunze or whatever the case may be in the offseason, I am not worried about that. If Jordan Love continues to ascend the way he's ascending this year, then I am not going to be worried about the production or the quarterback play in moves for Jaden Reed. This is why I truly believe this could be a high to mid-end wide receiver 2, even maybe this is, once again, I've said it earlier, a little bit of a too much, but a low-end wide receiver 1B. I think there is potential that he can get there if Jordan Love continues to play the way he is continuing. So Jaden Reed is my first rising player. All right, my second riser of this video here, the only running back on the list, that is Javonte Williams for the Denver Broncos. And look, we've seen a little bit of an up and down season for Javonte Williams here. He is currently the RB1 as we speak, once again going into week 13. But one of the biggest things to keep in mind, he is currently on Keep Trade Cut running back 15. He is my running back 12, and hard to put him any higher, but I do believe he does have the ability to be a top 12 running back going into the 2024 season. And let me tell you why. Look, one of the biggest reasons why he is a riser for me going into this off season and going into the 2024 season draft class, right, is because how weak the running back draft class is. As I'm recording this right now, there are only 2 running backs that I truly believe could come in and take jobs away from a starting running back like a Javonte Williams. One, that is Trey Benson, and that is a Travion Henderson. And as I am recording this, just broke probably about 20 minutes ago, on Twitter, that Travion Henderson is actually going back to college. Now, if that is not true later on, maybe something changes, or maybe he says, you know what, I'm going to the NFL. That's a whole different story. But as I'm recording this, if that news is true, then there's only one running back I truly believe as of right now could take a job from someone like a Javonte Williams right now, and that is Trey Benson. We both like Trey Benson, Zach and myself, and also Travion Henderson. Very interesting that Travion Henderson is going back to college. Okay, so keep that in mind. Look, with that being said, I am not necessarily worried about this, running back free agency to hinder someone's job like a Javonte Williams. Okay, yes, I can think of a Josh Jacobs. I can think of a Saquon Barkley, the Austin Ecklers, to maybe go onto this team and take away opportunities from Javonte. I do believe that. Another offense, another team that I don't believe a running back is their priority. We've seen them bring in Samaje Perine. We've seen the emergence of Jaleel McLaughlin. By the way, I am not concerned about both of these guys either. Samaje Perine does have an out in 2024. That cap hit is only 1.5 million. That's not too big for an NFL franchise like the Denver Broncos. Jaleel McLaughlin is somebody that I like, and we've seen him getting opportunities here. So that is something very interesting to monitor. Not only that, we have seen very minuscule opportunity for Javonte Williams. He has only had one game cracked over, or one game that he has hit over 70% of the workload. So far this year, he's been on a rotation, a 3-head rotation with Samaje Perine and Jaleel McLaughlin. And that's in my personal opinion, is because he's still not healthy. He's still not 100% off that ACL tear. And that is the biggest caveat here we have seen. And he is somebody all season I've been saying, whether it was in redraft or in a dynasty startup, I've been saying, look, these running backs are coming off an ACL tear. The history does not prove itself well. You want to avoid these guys for the 1-year punt. In a dynasty perspective, if you had a Javonte Williams, you had to keep him. Maybe you sold him away, but if you did keep him, I said you have to wait until the 2024 season for him to really come back and be the Javonte Williams that we saw, in his rookie year. Okay, so when I think of that, and you can probably see this graphic on your screen, look at these running backs in the past 5 years that have tore their ACL, and look at their fantasy finishes. You can see, the most recent one that I see here on this list is Saquon Barkley, a number 2 pick in the NFL draft, a blue-collar running back coming off an ACL tear, and he finished the year after he tore his ACL as the RB30, right? There's only 2 running backs from what I've known, when I looked up and done my research, you can probably see this on your screen here, there's only 2 running backs that have finished as a top 10 running back the year after they tore their ACL, and that is Adrian Peterson and Todd Gurley. Dalvin Cook tore his ACL, was only an RB19, which is above average, I would say, for an ACL tear, right? Like he had a pretty decent year that year for someone like a Dalvin Cook, but you shouldn't have relied on Javonte Williams going into the 2023 season. This is why he is one of the biggest risers coming into this class, right, into this 2024 year, because of how weak the 24 class is and how important running backs are going to be in the offseason. If you are listening to this video and watching this video and you need a running back and you were banking on the 24 class, I encourage you right now to look at running backs. Maybe go look at my ranking. Go look at Zach rankings and say, look, I need a running back and I'm okay at wide receiver. You were hoping that there was going to be a first-round running back. I'm not necessarily sure there is going to be a first-round rookie running back going in your rookie drafts. We say always, draft based off talent, not based off needs. Okay, so I wouldn't expect you guys to reach for a running back in the first round. So once again, Javonte Williams, one of my biggest risers, purely based off of his production that I am predicting going into the 2024 season and how weak this class is. And we've seen this Denver Bronco team rolling in the second half of the season. I'm pretty sure they were winning 5 games straight. They just lost to the Houston Texans. They have an opportunity to get into the playoffs. This is a team that potentially can get into the playoffs and have a pick in the late first of the NFL draft, which means that they're going to be prioritizing other needs. Remember coming into this offseason that, Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton was up for grabs. They were saying, hey, we want to trade these guys away. Do they trade him away now? Do they keep him? Do they go sign someone big like a T. Higgins? I'm not necessarily sure at the wide receiver position, but what I do know is that the running back position, in my opinion, won't be touched going into the 2024 season. All right, my third riser on this list, another wide receiver as well. And I think this one may be a little bit obvious, but I think a lot of people could potentially be pivoting off this player because they think this team can draft another wide receiver or pay big for another wide receiver, or because of their recent injury that they just acquired for this player, and that is Tank Dell. Yes, Tank Dell in week 13 against the Denver Broncos did fracture his fibula. He is out for the rest of the season. But look, from what I do know and what we've seen from Tank Dell, he is phenomenal. He is currently the wide receiver 19 as he finishes his season. I think if the season ended this, today, hypothetically, you were saying Tank Dell can easily be a top 15, top 12 wide receiver. And that's exactly where I'm going to be having him. Right now in the community, he's wide receiver 13. I currently have him as my wide receiver 11, ahead of the likes, which may sound crazy, and I may get roasted in the comments for this right now, and I'm putting my stamp on it. He's ahead of the likes of someone like a Jalen Waddle, someone like a Jordan Addison, and let me tell you why. Purely based off two names: C.J. Stroud. He is a pillar in this franchise. He is a pillar in fantasy. He is somebody that is going to continue to produce fantasy relevant wide receivers. We've seen it already with literally 3 players that we were not expecting to have this season, this year with. One with Tank Dell. I mean, if you were like myself, look, Tank Dell had those traits to be a good route runner, but he was undersized, and we had to change our whole narrative when it came down to the undersized wide receiver. Someone like a Nico Collins, who didn't produce for a long time, comes out and he's a top wide receiver right now. A Noah Brown, who also came out of nowhere and had nearly 250 plus yards in 2 games. That's how good CJ Stroud is. And let me tell you this team, this offense, this defense, CJ Stroud, another year under his belt, going into his year 2 with Tank Dell, is just going to get even better. I will not be surprised as we get close into the season if Tank Dell is a top 10 wide receiver, ahead of the likes of the people, like I've said, like a Jaden Waddle, like maybe a Jordan Addison, a Brandon Ayuk. You think of the DK Metcalfs, you think of all these other wide receivers that you're probably questioning right now because Tank Dell was taken in the later rounds. No, this is Tank Dell. This is Tank Dell's season. This is exactly what you want. One of the best separators in the class right now so far that we've seen. Somebody that we did not expect. He is currently leading in rookies in yardage, as if, once again, before his injury, he was second in yardage behind Puka Nacua. Another big reason here is the storyline. They drafted CJ Stroud and they went to their new number 1 or number 2 overall pick in their pillar franchise piece and said, who do you want? Who do you think we can get out of those wide receivers? He looked at all of them. Whoever he looked in straight in the face, the GM, the owner, the head coach, and says, I want Tank Dell. The fact that he advocated for someone like Tank Dell to come into this organization and has produced him to be at this moment, once again, wide receiver 19, just makes me believe that this is going to be a long connection for a long time. So if you are somebody that owns Tank Dell, if you are somebody that's saying, hey, I'm a contending team and I need to trade away Tank Dell to go out and win, I think that could be a mistake potentially. Maybe if you are really need another wide receiver, I get it. But if you can keep him, I 100% would. Like I said, we are going to be having lots of conversations about Tank Dell and CJ Stroud. And this is like trading away, in my opinion. I'm not putting him in the likes of these guys. I'm saying with the connection that we've seen from quarterback and wide receiver, this is the Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. This is the Stephon Diggs to Josh Allen. This is, A.J. Brown to Jalen Hurts. This is what Tank Dell is going to be. This is what I'm projecting, that he is going to be one of those pillar wide receivers, one of those pillar stacks, the Keenan Allen to Justin Herbert. He is going to be a pillar stack. And if you are concerned about the Houston Texans maybe even drafting a wide receiver in the first round, once again, if they draft an elite slot wide receiver like an Emeka Egbuka, then I'm a little bit concerned. I would agree. I am a little bit concerned because I do believe Emeka Egbuka is an overall better talent than a Tank Dell. And then he's going back with his old college quarterback. That's a whole different conversation. But if you're telling me you're going to get once again, a Roma Dunze, a Brian Thompson, an Xavier Worthy, or a Troy Franklin, whatever the case may be, whoever, if they're not naming Mika Ibuka, I am 100% confident in Tank Dell and his longevity with CJ Stroud going into the 24 season and beyond. So keep in mind, he is a wide receiver 19 in the fantasy finish. He's currently wide receiver 14 in the community, and he is my wide receiver 11. All right, and last but not least, my last wide receiver on this list here, another rookie, Jackson Smith-Njigba for the Seattle Seahawks here. And yes, he's been having a very underwhelming season. We've seen glimpses of how we thought he can be, the things that he can do this year so far. So far this year, wide receiver 49 in the fantasy perspective, wide receiver, or quote, 45 receptions out of 68 targets, under 500 yards, and only 2 touchdowns, right? And we really haven't seen this uptick in production to the second half of the season. He's been getting 7, 6, 5 targets per game, and then sometimes you see that drop to 2 or 3, and it's just been very inconsistent. One of my biggest arguments coming into this year for Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I did love, saying that I'm not necessarily sure that pathway was going to happen this year. I think a lot of people knew it was going to be a little bit bumpy, but expected a transition, a shift in Tyler Lockett's production. We still haven't seen that going into 13 weeks of the season. I would say last week against the Dallas Cowboys was the first time we saw that. Caught 7 out of 11 targets, 62 yards, had over 13 fantasy points that game. But that was the first time we truly saw, Geno Smith purposefully targeting Jackson Smith-Njigba. Now, maybe this narrative is going to change as the season progresses and we see the last 6 games of the season, or 6 to 4 games of the season. But my biggest narrative here is that I truly believe Tyler Lockett could be walking away. And one of my biggest things here is that Tyler Lockett does have an out. And the reason why I am smiling is because I'm thinking of this out and I'm thinking of him being moved on or traded away, and who picks him up? The Denver Broncos. He reunites with Russell Wilson, his favorite quarterback, of course, who has produced and made him be a top 12 quarterback or top 12 wide receiver every single year, essentially. That could be a really fun narrative for Tyler Lockett. But that can also be an even better narrative for Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is going to be getting another year under this belt with Geno Smith, with this offensive coordinator, with the likes of Pete Carroll, who has also said, you know what, we need to get Jackson Smith-Njigba the ball more. And if you are watching this video and your trade deadline probably passed, but if it didn't, and you are in a league, in a dynasty league where your trade deadline is open throughout the whole season until week 18, and then it closes for a couple weeks and then it reopens, this is the perfect opportunity to go out and acquire Jackson Smith-Njigba. He is currently the wide receiver 16 in the community, and I have him as my wide receiver 14. He is not a massive riser, but somebody that I truly do believe is going to be rising even higher if those things that I mentioned does, come to life. If Tyler Lockett does walk away, that is something that we can see for Jackson Smith-Njigba to skyrocket to be a top 12 wide receiver, okay? And yes, the Seattle Seahawks do have a decent pick coming into this NFL draft. They're not technically out of it yet. If you think about their draft pick, they are in the middle of the pack here. If the season ended today, they would have the 15th overall pick, which leaves them in a good, middle of the pack. Is that Mika Ibuka? Is that a Roma Dunze, which I doubt he gets out of the first? Is that a Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy? A lot of people love Keon Coleman. Whoever the case may be, that can 100% hinder Jackson Smith-Njigba. But if they get a Mika Ibuka and then have Jackson Smith-Njigba there, that could be a nasty, nasty duo, which I truly don't believe could affect him. Jackson Smith-Njigba, one of the elite slot wide receivers in this NFL, just hasn't seen the production and the uptick that we hope and expect. And look, Geno's on the hot seat, okay? A quarterback change could be happening here, which could help Jackson Smith-Njigba as well. Not saying that is going to happen. However, the way that looks like as well, if the Seattle Seahawks, who do have a tough schedule, San Francisco, Philly, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee, and not, those other 2 names aren't the toughest. But if they lose every single game, they can have a top 12 pick which means, is that a Jaden Daniels? Is that a JJ McCarthy? Is that a Bo Nix, if you believe all these guys can be a top, first round pick in the NFL draft? So many things can happen, but what I do know for sure in the talent of Jackson Smith-Njigba, and what I am predicting, is that his production is going to have an uptick going into the 2024 class. So Jackson Smith-Njigba, Javonte Williams, Tank Dell, and Jaden Reed, my top 4 risers going into the 2024 class, guys. We appreciate each and every one of you. And before I let you go, if you guys want to support, get our Dynasty rankings, get our 2024 rookie, pamphlet and booklet with all the information on there, with our gradings, our pro comparisons, our descriptions, our breakdowns, the films, everything that you want that's going to be in that package. All you have to do is sign up at flockfantasy.com/land. Use the promo code LAND, get 30% off at sign up. Not only do you get that rookie pamphlet, you get our bonus articles, you get our rookie rankings, you get our in-season rankings, our dynasty rankings, everything and more, not only from us, but from all the other content creators on the website, guys. We appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure you drop a like and subscribe. And as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.